My husband says the family is responsible. He said as much to two of our people just the other day, the ones who are in charge now, I think. And who are they? What are their names? What do they look like? Where are they? Sivits tried not to rush, but he was finding it difficult. Time was short. I believe she is a doctor. The man is somewhat plain in his looks, but also maybe in his head. I think it's the wife who controls things. She's very strong. And you don't know their names? Sivits tried again. No. Or where they are? No. Jesus. He turned and walked to the window. The Capitol dome loomed just a few blocks away, with the needle of the Washington Monument in the distance. It was a great nighttime city, really. Not that he ever got to enjoy it. Again, the woman spoke up, followed by the interpreter. What the woman had said seemed important. Her voice had risen. What I can tell you is where the next attack will be. Also maybe when it is scheduled. Everything in the room seemed to go still. When Sivits turned around, Mrs. Angawi's expression had changed. Was she smiling? The corners of her mouth looked curled. Tell me, Sivits asked. Lindley was already dialing his phone. Give me a location, a time, whatever you've got. Then you'll get what you want. She sat back. Yes, she was definitely smiling. She was just as smug as her husband when she wanted to be, wasn't she? Taking her time now, the woman picked up the uneaten half of her sandwich and carefully wrapped it in a paper napkin. She tucked it into the purse on the table next to her, and then put the purse on her lap, speaking quietly through the translator as she did. As soon as you get me out of this God-forsaken city, I'll tell you what you want to know.
Chapter 77. First thing the next morning, I was back on the trail of Zoe Coyle's cell phone. The number I got from her friends traced to a prepaid Firefly flip model. It was the kind of thing you could pick up at any convenience store. No calling plan, no subscriber information required. Zoe had obviously gone to some trouble to keep this thing a secret. Pixies were especially popular with school kids since they were so small and easy to hide. Even their advertising campaign played it up. Where's your Firefly? I hated to think about where Zoe's might be right now. Buried underground somewhere? In pieces at the side of the highway? Sitting in some maniac's glove compartment? None of the images that flooded in my mind were good ones. As soon as I had the signatures I needed, I faxed off an administrative subpoena for records to the phone company down in Jacksonville, Florida. I gave them exactly 1 hour to respond. When I didn't hear back, I called and left a message for the director of security. Another subpoena was on the way. He could bring those records up and present them to the grand jury himself, if that's how he wanted to play it. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Detective Cross is Bill Shattuck with Essential Electronics. How can I help you? What don't you already know? I asked, cutting through the bullshit. Well, I've got the records for the number you requested right here in front of me. Should I email you a copy? Please, and thank you, I said. Shattuck cleared his throat. There's one other thing. I can send you the transaction logs for text messages and voice calls, no problem, but we just don't have the kind of data storage you get with an AT&T or a Verizon. The actual content of any texts drops off our system after 7 or 8 days, and the last transaction on this phone was, 12 days ago. An incoming text on September 9th. No surprise there. Just a little punch to the stomach. That was the day of the kidnapping. Just send me what you've got. Thanks again, I told him, and hung up. The report came through a minute later. As soon as I got it, I scrolled down to the bottom and looked at September 9th. The text in question was the only entry for that day. It had come into Zoe's phone at 8:05 a.m., right in the middle of Braniff's homeroom period. That was also about 15 minutes before Ethan and Zoe disappeared. It took me only a few keystrokes to run a reverse lookup on the incoming phone number. It was registered to a Kathy Allison with an address in Foggy Bottom. And in fact, I knew the exact house. I'd been there on Saturday to interview Ms. Allison's daughter Emma, one of Zoe's inner circle of girlfriends. I looked up at the clock. It was 10:15 a.m. Emma would be in class right now, 3rd period. If I left right away, I could be there by 4th. Chapter 78. Emma Allison's eyes went wide as she stepped out of the science lab and into the hall where I was waiting for her. So was the headmaster. Emma, Detective Cross is here to ask you a few questions, Mr. Skillings told her. She seemed like a scared little girl to me, but in a 14 going on 30 kind of way. She had too much dark liner around her eyes and a pair of half-shredded leggings under her school uniform. The thick-soled boots looked just like the red ones Zoe had been wearing the morning she disappeared. Did they find Zoe? She blurted out. Oh, please, 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 please. No, I'm sorry, Emma, I said. Actually, what I need is to get a look at your phone. My phone? But why? What's going on? Do you have your phone with you? I hope not, Skillings said pointedly. The students aren't allowed to have any electronics in class. Isn't that right, Emma? It's in my locker, she said. The headmaster motioned her up the hall, not even trying to hide his impatience. I had already spent a good 15 minutes in his office tracking down Ms. Allison and getting permission to speak with Emma in the first place. We followed her outside and across a breezeway into one of the campus's several red brick annex buildings. Halfway up another hallway, Emma stopped at locker 733 and twirled the combination on the lock. She reached inside, took out an iPhone in a zebra-striped rubber case, and held it out for me. Her eyes flared again when I pulled on a pair of latex gloves to take it from her. Emma, when we spoke on Saturday, you said that the last time you had any contact with Zoe was the afternoon before the kidnapping. Is that right? I asked. Yeah, we have 8th period social studies. She craned her neck trying to see what I was doing. I'd powered up the phone and navigated over to her sent messages. Sure enough, there it was, September 9th, 8:05 a.m. Z, quick Siggy before assembly, ditch if you can, please. I've got major dirt to share. XO, E. And there were no calls between you two on the morning she and Ethan disappeared. No texts? I asked. That's right, Emma told me. I got to school, put my phone in my locker, and went to homeroom like always. Why? You're positive about that. This is important, Emma. This is extremely important. I swear. She fiddled nervously with the purple ribbon around her wrist. Most of the students and staff had started wearing them since the kidnapping. Am I in trouble? She asked. No, I said, but I am going to have to hold on to this phone for a little while. A minute later, I was double-timing it back down to the visitor's lot in my car. Finally, we had some kind of pattern to work with, or at least the suggestion of one. Could that earlier text from Ryan Townsend's phone have been a test run of some kind? Were there others? And most of all, if Emma Allison's phone was in her locker that morning and she didn't send this latest message, who did? The caller had to be the kidnapper. Who else could it be? Chapter 79. Suddenly, a lot was happening, even more than I realized. I was shuttling back over to headquarters when I got a call from Ned Mahoney. It's your better half, he said, and snorted out a laugh. Well, you got Bree, Nana Mama, and John Sampson ahead of you on that one, I said. But what's up? Those 2 arrests from last night? The dude in the wheelchair and the 60-something accomplice? I don't know what kind of black op hole they fell into, but one of them must have coughed up some serious intel. Joint Terrorism Task Force is standing up another whole operation for tomorrow night. They've already got full surveillance going on some parking garage in Chinatown. That's all I have so far. But it's going to be big, Alex, and I'm not talking about just standing around watching this time. I could barely process what Ned was telling me. My mind was overflowing with the details of everything I'd just learned at the Braniff School. Thanks, Ned, but my plate's a little full here, I said. Isn't that what I have you for? Actually, buddy, old friend, old pal, I was calling to get in on your team. This takedown's going to be all SWAT, but they're pulling people from the kidnapping side for the investigative unit. I'm thinking this time you bring me in. Ned, I don't even know what we're talking about, I said. You will. I wouldn't be surprised if your captain's leaving you a voicemail about it right now. There's a briefing, 2 o'clock today. It's at the police academy in Southwest. Why all the way down there? I asked. They need the room. They're going to be staging this thing all into the night. Like I said, mucho grande. Tell me you'll let me tag along. You don't need my permission for that, I told him. Actually, I do this time. This was unbelievable. I thought about everything I still had to get done, the things I wanted to do myself and the few things I could hand off. There were dozens of calls and texts on Zoe's phone to track back. I also had to try and reach the First Lady if I could. Let me make this easy for you, Ned said, cutting into my thoughts. You're coming to the briefing. You know it, and I know it. Can we move on now? I swear he's got caffeine instead of blood. The guy's one of the Bureau's locomotives. And he was right. If this had anything to do with the kidnapping, I wanted to be in on it, whether I had the time and energy or not. Yeah, I said, all right. Police Academy, 2 o'clock. And where's this parking garage you're talking about anyway?
Chapter 80. That Thursday evening at 6 o'clock exactly, Hala and Tariq's attack team convened on the upper level of the Chinatown Municipal Parking Garage on H Street. There were 8 of them in all, 4 couples who arrived separately and would also travel in their own vehicles to the target site. Everyone wore Western business dress, as they had been instructed to do. The men's jackets and the women's tops were specially cut to conceal the identical Sig Sauer pistols they'd all been issued. Only Tariq was unarmed. He'd resisted his part in the assignment, but Hala insisted he be there. He handed around earbuds, transmitters, and laminated conference badges while she began the briefing. "I'll make this fast as possible," Hala said. "The U.S. Secretary of the Interior, Justin Pileggi, is scheduled to address the World Alternative Energy Expo at 7:30 tonight. Pileggi will have a full security detail, of course, and they'll keep him moving around the convention center. His remarks may or may not start on time. We need to keep ourselves just as unpredictable," she said. "Anyone watching out for an assassin will have 7 of us to contend with. No one can stop us." There were a few approving smiles around the circle, a few nervous expressions as well, but they all got the plan. "If at any time you have a clear shot, you're to take it," Hala went on. "At that point, the rest of you should know what to do. Escape if you're able, and if not—" She held up the cyanide capsule from her pocket in one hand and her cig in the other. "Those are the options. Any questions?" No one was smiling now. "I have a question," one of the men said. He was the tallest in the group, with a heavy brow and an aggressive stare. "What about the arrests at Masjid al-Qazim the other night?" Hala kept her face expressionless, but the question surprised her. She hadn't realized anyone even knew about the mosque, much less Uncle's disappearance. "What about them?" she said. "Well, it's troubling, isn't it?" The rest of the group remained perfectly still, their eyes darting between Hala and the other man. This one wasn't just obnoxious, she realized. He was dangerous. He'd have to be dealt with accordingly, but now was not the time. "There were arrests, it's true," she said. "There have been murders and suicides as well. Bombings, too. We're at war, if you haven't noticed." "But who's in charge now?" he asked. "Who is the leader here in Washington?" "I am," Hala said without hesitation. "This is how the family works. One falls and another is there to take his place. Washington will be brought to its knees. Make no mistake about it. Where is your loyalty, brother?" "Don't preach at me, sister," he shot back. "My loyalty is to Allah and to the family, not to you. Do you even know if this assignment is meant to proceed?" The truth was, Hala didn't know. There had been no word either way. But she never got to answer the insolent man's question. Before anyone realized it was happening, 3 stun grenades skittered across the cement floor and went off in a shattering volley of noise. Suddenly, men in gas masks and dark uniforms were streaming out of the stairwells, carrying M16s and AR-15 assault weapons. 2 more flashbangs went off almost right away. One of them detonated at Hala's feet, and she was completely deaf before she even started to run away.
Chapter 81. It was a huge coordinated operation. SWAT units from 3 different agencies made up the first line of attack. Mahoney and I were pressed into the parking garage stairwell, waiting for our go-ahead from the unit commander. Once the suspects were contained, we'd go in as part of a second wave and take it from there: arrest, transport, and questioning. I heard 3 flashbangs go off like giant firecrackers. Then a rush of pounding footsteps and shouting as the SWAT teams moved in. The whole idea was to catch these people off guard and contain them before anyone could reach for the cyanide. If there was one thing we knew about Al-Aila by now, it was that they had no regard for human life, including their own people. These operatives were just disposable garbage to them. A second round of stun grenades echoed off the concrete walls, ceilings, and floor. Even in the stairwell, the sound hurt my ears. My heart was thudding. Mahoney was champing at the bit, waiting to go like a horse at the starting gate. It wasn't in his nature to hold off at times like these. Then suddenly I heard the distinct percussive pop of gunfire. A single shot came first.